A woman who walks 12 miles a day will now have a smoother journey thanks to a cop who gave her a free bike. It was another long day for one woman who just wanted to get to her job on time. She was walking on the sidewalk when she noticed through her peripheral vision that there was a car slowly approaching her. Trying to ignore it, she kept on walking, her eyes fixed on the sidewalk. However, the car seemed persistent. It got slowly closer and closer to the curb. Silently praying, she hoped beyond hope that her worst fears weren't coming true. In a quick glance, the woman noticed the blue and red lights. Clearly, it was a cop car. Not today, she kept on praying, but the driver honked his horn. The driver was clearly calling the woman's attention. The car came to a full stop now, and he was repeatedly honking his horn. The woman was racking her brain, trying to think why this was happening. As far as she remembered, she did nothing against the law. She was a simple woman who waved and greeted her neighbors every morning before heading out to work. She was under the control of her emotions and temper, whether it was a professional or social situation. Why would a cop suddenly come over and order her to stop? Sergeant Scott Bass was driving along in his cruiser that day. He was on his way to the Nash County Sheriff's Office to report for duty. He was approaching the Stone Gate mobile home community when suddenly a familiar figure caught his attention. For days now, the cop had been hoping to see the woman. He felt that he had some sort of an unfinished business with her. Now that he had seen her, there was no way he was going to waste the opportunity. The woman, Jalisa Corbett, was on her way to work at the popular fast food joint Bojangles. The walk to work was tolerable enough for her as she was already used to it. However, that day, the sudden bursts of rainy weather made the usual routine significantly more difficult. She had an umbrella when she left home, but when she tried to open it, a strong gust of wind had taken it out of her hand. Nevertheless, she persisted. She was nowhere near her destination and soaking wet from the downpour, but she still remained alert and tried to avoid the growing puddles on the sidewalk ahead. It was enough of a struggle to get to work, and running into a cop was the last thing on her mind. For Jalisa, making her way to her workplace on a sunny day was burden enough. The least she could wish for on her everyday routine was good weather, but judging by the wind and the rain, she felt as if she was caught in the middle of a Category 5 hurricane. For her, the struggle she was facing that day was 10 times worse than her average long walk of a commute because of the bad weather. But she knew she could deal with it and make it successfully and safely to Bojangles. But not necessarily with a cop on her tail. Jalisa Corbett did everything she could to make her daily routine an easy one. To the best of what she could afford, she purchased a comfortable pair of sneakers. However, she knew those shoes couldn't save her from the rainwater. Her feet were already wet, and she already felt the pain of blisters forming on her heels and toes from the wet socks. And although it was not her first time walking such a long way, her aching feet seemed to shout for mercy. Every day she has to walk from home to Bojangles and then back home in the afternoon. The journey covers a whopping total of 12 miles round trip. It might sound unbelievable to most, but for this woman, the daily burden meant she could bring home more money to her family. She felt strongly that no one, not even a cop, could stop her from doing so. The 12-mile walk on foot was no match to Corbett's determination. She was willing to do everything for her children, and even though it didn't feel like it, that long journey was just a small sacrifice when it came to the big picture of caring for her family. The thought of not letting them down fueled her strength every step of the way. However, the cop that stopped her made her rethink everything. She was walking on the highway every day, risking her life over and over again. Perhaps she was becoming a hassle to the motorists. Could it be the reason why she was stopped that day? But why that day of all days? Jalisa knew that pretending to ignore the cop wouldn't work for much longer, as the driver kept on honking his horn. Instead of killing herself wondering what she did wrong, she finally decided to stop and wait for the cop to approach. When the driver lowered the window, she could almost hear her own heart pounding. For her, a cop always means trouble. She was afraid that he would say dreadful things to her, or worse. Although she was running late, she had no choice but to face him. As if it were Judgment Day, she figured she might as well know her fate right at that moment. Even if her mind didn't tell her to stop walking, she knew the cop would soon catch her, as she felt her legs go weak with fear. For a simple woman who just wanted to do her day's work and be able to get back to her family, this experience was far too much. There were plenty of negative thoughts in her mind. What if she did something she was unaware of? What if the cop suddenly seized her and put her in the back seat and drove straight to jail? What would happen to her poor family? Trying to appear as calm as she could, Jalisa decided to approach the cop. With her heart pounding through her chest, she walked cautiously towards the car. The side of it bore the words, "Sheriff, Nash County." She was trying to rehearse what she would say to him in her mind, but the cop spoke first. As soon as Jalisa Corbett heard the words, she felt flabbergasted. The words were spoken softly, and yet she had a hard time processing the meaning behind them. However, when the realization finally hit her, her fear and confusion weren't quite assuaged. The cop, who introduced himself as Sergeant Bass, smoothly told her to get out of the street. But as smooth as it sounded, Jalisa detected the hidden authority in his tone. When he asked her to get into the cop car, she told him she had to get to Bojangles for work. The cop noticed the panic on the woman's face. She was arguing as if her life depended on it. However, he firmly repeated the words. Jalisa Corbett had to get into the car. Seeing that the cop wouldn't leave her behind, she decided to follow his command. There was no way she was going to win the argument. Now she was completely under the cop's control. Seated inside the cop's car, Jalisa felt so helpless. While she wasn't entirely sure if she was in danger or not, the fate that awaited her was still unknown. Sergeant Bass resumed driving silently, not uttering another sound. Looking at the cop, she knew he wouldn't say any more. It was evident on his calm face that he had already made up his mind about her. Her thoughts were already spinning. She couldn't stop thinking about her children, the images of their faces swirling in her mind. Her job was on her mind as well. She couldn't afford to lose it. She was in turmoil. When Sergeant Bass continued to drive, Jalisa began to wonder. Was he taking her to the sheriff's office for further questioning? Although the cop didn't put her in handcuffs, she couldn't help but feel nervous. There was a deafening silence inside the cruiser. The cop's eyes were focused on the road in front of them. Jalisa kept on looking at him as if urging him to start a conversation. However, he wasn't looking at her. It seemed that his mouth was already shut. Thinking that she might say something wrong, she decided to stay silent and tried to not appear anxious at all. Outside, the rainstorm kept on hammering the city. As the cop slowed down the car to follow the speed limits, Jalisa felt as if the ride couldn't possibly get any longer. It was tough to drive in such weather, and she decided not to bother him at all. But deep inside her, she felt like she'd pass out from unspoken fear. However, Jalisa thought to herself, instead of striking up a conversation that might arouse suspicion and misunderstanding, she tried to think happy thoughts instead. She was a woman who was always up for a challenge. Although she was of a lower socioeconomic status, she knew deep down that she didn't do anything wrong in her struggles to get by. In the meantime, she had to go with the flow while at the same time being vigilant. Soon enough, Jalisa regretted her decision. When her confusion began to clear, her wits came back to her. Come to think of it, cop or no cop, this man had no right to just stop her in her tracks without telling her the reason why. As a respectful citizen, it was her right to know the reason behind her supposed arrest. While he might look like a good cop, it was still wrong to order her to get in a cop's car. Furthermore, he kept her hanging in confusion by not speaking at all. She was about to rant when she noticed that the car was heading to Bojangles, exactly where she works. Upon confirming that they were heading to her workplace, Jalisa Corbett realized she was in a desperate position. Thoughts of her manager and co-workers seeing her inside of a cop car raced through her mind. What would her boss think of her situation? It's easy to jump to conclusions in this kind of situation. As a mother who provides for her family, losing a job can spell disaster. Her situation could easily ruin her reputation, and she might have a hard time finding a new job again. She regretted that she didn't try to run earlier. Perhaps a lone cop would not bother running after her in the middle of a rainstorm anyway. Sergeant Bass was aware what the woman was thinking. However, he chose to be silent. He meant no harm anyway, though she didn't know that. Driving to his job at the sheriff's office of Nash County every day, he had soon learned the story of this woman who walks 12 miles on foot every single day, rain or shine. He'd noticed the woman's uniform and knew she worked at Bojangles. He was aware that walking 12 miles a day in good weather is no easy feat. Seeing her walk in the middle of a rainstorm with no umbrella almost broke his heart. To him, no one deserves that fate. He felt that he had to do something for the amazing woman. For a cop who gets tired at times during a long drive, walking for 12 miles every day was simply unfathomable. It was his first time hearing such a story, and seeing her doing it with his own eyes, despite the bad weather, was too much to bear. He didn't know much about the woman, only that she was a mother who was willing to sacrifice her health and safety for the sake of her family. Although the cop was aware that any mother would go beyond her limits just to be able to feed her children, seeing one in real life was simply mind-boggling. He was a toughened cop, and yet the woman had found the soft spot in his heart. Finally, Jayleesa Corbat understood what the cop was doing. He'd given her a free ride to Bojangles. Going to her workplace and back home ate up over 4 hours of her day. But the estimate was applicable only when the weather was good. Jayleesa was blown away by the cop's generosity. Sergeant Bass offered to give her a ride every time the weather was bad. The cop assured her that they were heading the same way and that it would cause no hassle to him. He didn't tell her how impressed he was with her unrivaled determination. However, his act of generosity was more than enough for Jayleesa. She felt very grateful, but it seemed that it was only the beginning of a life-changing moment. Sergeant Bass was blown away by the woman's willingness and effort to make it to her job every day so that she could provide for her family. While most women today take more than their share of work, to the cop, Jayleesa was different. As a cop, he knew it was not his responsibility to give the woman a free ride to work when it was raining. It was not in his job description. However, he couldn't get the thought of her daily struggle off his mind. He knew he could do more for this hardworking mother. But what could he possibly give? Although Sergeant Bass kept his offer and continued to give her a lift, Jayleesa Corbat couldn't help but feel nervous when the cop asked her to meet up. It wasn't raining and she didn't have the slightest idea why Sergeant Bass wanted to see her. But then she complied. She was asked to come over to the sheriff's office. Although she was not sure what it was about, she felt sure that the cop meant no harm. When he saw her, he reached into his vehicle and hauled out something big. It was a new Schwinn Fairhaven women's cruiser bicycle. Before she could even react, Sergeant Bass told her that it was a present for her. Well, on her way to meet Sergeant Bass, Jayleesa Corbat kept on thinking that she would end up in jail. But when the cop presented the gift, she instantly felt ashamed for thinking the worst. To her, kindness from grown-ups is so rare, it can be compared to a four-leaf clover. Looking at the brand new bike, Jayleesa didn't know what to say. In an instant, she knew her life was about to change. The cop's simple act of kindness made her believe in humanity once more. For Sergeant Bass, Jayleesa is one of the most admirable persons he met in his lifetime. For the sake of her family, she didn't care about getting blisters on her feet, walking a total of 12 miles every day back and forth from work. Not only that, but the woman's work required her to stand all day, which made the situation even harder. Seeing a glimpse of opportunity to someone lessen her daily burden, Sergeant Bass thought of a way how he could help her. The mother, who faced all kinds of weather just to be able to raise her family in a decent way, had gained his full admiration. Today, even those people who can afford to have their own vehicles, or those who can pay for transportation costs, opt to use bikes for a healthier living. For Jayleesa, the bike can make all the difference in her life. Finally, her legs and feet wouldn't have to take the full journey anymore. With a bike, everything seemed easier. Although it's quite awkward for Jayleesa to receive something like this from a cop who's almost a stranger to her in one way or another, Sergeant Bass made her feel that he was not doing this for the sake of charity. Instead, he made her feel as though she totally deserved the gift. It warmed her heart knowing that someone out there appreciated her hard work. The meeting between Sergeant Bass and Jayleesa Corbat was recorded by other cops from Nash County Sheriff's Office. The video was then posted on YouTube by CBS 17. In a matter of hours, the video gained more than 6,000 views. Judging by the comments and likes, the community was amazed by the life-changing moment. The Nash County Sheriff's Office felt proud of their cop's act of generosity. They were really impressed by the woman's story and felt that she totally deserved what Sergeant Bass had given her. They also added a post to the viral video, recognizing Sergeant Bass's attitude towards lending a helping hand to those in need. There's no denying that some people do not trust the police force anymore, but just like any other profession, if there are bad apples, there are good ones as well. Who would have thought that a hardened man would notice a woman's silent struggle every day? Sergeant Bass had clearly set a new inspiration to the other cops. His act of kindness is proof that it doesn't matter how big or how little. The most important thing is the thought of helping someone in need. It might not be in his job description. However, he went out of his way to change someone's life for the better. Would you do the same? Since the video went viral, people from the media sought Jayleesa Corbat, who gladly put up with an interview. When asked about what she felt, she told the media that she was shocked. It was like a dream for her. She didn't have the slightest idea that Sergeant Bass was already aware of her journey every day. Whenever she walked, all that she thought of was how to get to work on time. Little did she know that someone was out there watching her, admiring her for her determination. Today, she doesn't need to walk 12 miles on foot anymore. Sergeant Bass can easily drive to his work every day, completely ignoring the woman. But as days go by, the thought of her daily burden began to creep into his mind. That day when he saw her making her way to work in the middle of a rainstorm, he realized he just can't look. He needed to do something. Sergeant Bass's mission in life is to serve and protect. Seeing how Jalisa Corbett risks her life every day for her family, the cop knew he can make her life a little better. It doesn't need expensive gifts to bring a little change. To him, the bike was nothing compared to the woman's sacrifice for her beloved family. Being a mother is considered one of the toughest professions in the world. From giving birth to the very end, a mother's sacrifice for her kids is priceless. Some would not eat just to be able to feed their children. They always think of themselves as the last priority. Jalisa Corbett is one of these amazing moms who can give all of herself to her family. She doesn't mind spending 4 hours walking back and forth just to be able to take home a bigger amount of money so their kids can have more. No matter what challenges she's up to, the thought of her family serves as her strength and armor. Corbett was not expecting that someone would notice her perseverance. All she ever wanted is to be able to provide for her family and to keep her strong work ethic. She became oblivious to her surroundings. As Sergeant Bass's gift will always remind her that good things can happen at the most unexpected time, and that there are still people who believe that this world can be a better place.